Hi, I'm Ryan Clark. On this episode, I'm going to dig into how you can actually stand out in your market amongst the sea of ChatGPT, copy-paste competitors out there, so you get attention from, say, executives and CEOs and people like that. I'm going to show you how you can actually use personalized direct outreaches so that you can cut through the noise, cut through the inbox, and again, reach those hard-to-reach types of people that you want to do business with. And I'm going to show you how to create a funnel that attracts people that are actually ready to buy something now, as opposed to spending, months in their sales cycle trying to educate a prospect before they're even thinking, maybe I should buy from this person. You're going to get all of that and so much more in this episode. Check it out.
Hello and welcome back once again to the Inquisitor Podcast with me, Marcus Cauchi. Today, my guest is Ryan Clark of Ryan Clark Consulting. Ryan and I are going to dig deep into the abuse that recipients are suffering at the moment, because the wall of noise is deafening on LinkedIn, on email, on all the platforms, because people are cutting and pasting from ChatGPT. They sound pretty much the same as everybody else, and they're not differentiating. And as a result of that, they're not really getting in front of the right people. They're spending an awful lot of time on coffee chats as opposed to with real prospects. And because they're not differentiating, they're running harder to go backwards. So without any further ado, Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus. Good to be here.
Would you mind giving us 60 seconds on your background and history and how you got to this point?
Yeah. So, major part of my background is storytelling. So ever since I've been doing marketing, I've always focused on how to create narrative that gets people moving and taking action. So, there's the other side of marketing, say the analytics and the conversion rate optimization and that stuff. And, I do that stuff and that's good and all, but I actually started off in video production, creating beautiful testimonial style videos for companies that we'd go interview their customers and tell their story. And that's how we drove a bulk of their sales. So I've always loved that, influence, persuasion, human psychology, and all those things. And it's really helped me help my clients to spread their good ideas. That's really my mission, to spread good ideas. Because as we know, there's a lot of bad ideas and people that are influencing the world for not such great things. So I'm here to help us spread our ideas so that we can, spread some more good in the world.
Excellent. Well, let's start with a rant. As you look at the state of marketing and business development at the moment, what is it that really gets your goat?
This kind of false perception that just because we have tools like ChatGPT, that we can create a message that drives results, that attracts the right kind of person and is actually going to get conversions. And it's not like, I use Cloud personally, another AI model, every single day. Every single day, I'm learning new ways to be more personalized, to reach out to the people that I want to be more compelling in my message. But, as I see, every single day, I see marketing funnels and I see messaging that's basically Me Too messaging that sounds like everyone else. Because what these large language models do is they just compile, hundreds of messages from other people that are just like you, and they put together into a sea of sameness. So it's kind of like if you mix different shades of brown, you're just going to get brown. So there's a lot of people that are wasting thousands, again, I talk to people like wasting thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on marketing, and marketers that are building these funnels that have forgotten you actually need to start with your sales messaging. And it's just, it's sad and really grinds my gears.
Well, I'm going to build on that, because what also grinds my gears is that years ago, the marketing essentially failed to get their seat on the board or as chief exec. And because they weren't doing a great job, they created this sort of monster role, the chief revenue officer, whose role it was to do what marketing should have done and weave everything that touches the customer together in a cohesive system. And so what we ended up with are lots of silos and this obsession with attribution, but no one seems to be measuring the important metrics. If you're spending 97 to 99% of your budget, your time, and your effort trying to get people off the total addressable market and into your ICP so that you can get them onto your marketing platform, so you can scream in their already deafened ear, "We're here, look at me." And then you measure the drop off from there to the sales platform, where you say, "Oh, look, this is what we do. Would you like one?" If you look at the mathematics of that, it's ludicrous. So at the moment, if you're cold calling, you could be making 36 to 42 dials just to get through to someone on your list. You then have to have around 14 conversations to get anyone to meet you for the first time. And then the most depressing statistic is the second meeting ratio, because 7 out of 8 first meetings never result in a second. Now, if you do the maths on that, that's really pretty terrible. 36 times 14 times 8, and you only get one outcome that you want, which is the second meeting, because if they invite you back, maybe you've been relevant. Isn't there a clue there that maybe we're looking at the wrong end of the problem?
Mhm. Yeah, those are some great points there. Yeah, it's like, so it's like we have to, on the one hand, it's so hard to just get that first call, to break through all of that noise in the first place. But then once they get there, you also got to make sure you did a great job, that once they're there, they want to work with you. So, and this is my whole point about having a great message. And you've got to do all of this work on the front end to make sure that, one, you're cutting through the noise. And then two, that once you have that call, you really make it count. Like, really, before you get on a call, somebody should be 80% pre-sold, or you're not going to get that second call. So that's where, on the one hand, it's, you don't want to, you don't want to do a million generic DMs. You want to do a few really personalized, like hyper personalized to a hyper niche market, so that you can be super compelling. And then you got to have the right content and the right outreach that's going to make them already want to work with you by the time they talk to you. But it's tough to do that, and it's easy to be with a CRO and just say, hey, we got 1 million calls this month, pay me, or whatever, right?
Well, you touched on the sort of holy trinity, which is timely, relevant, and valuable. And almost none of the marketing that I'm receiving at the moment is timely. Even less of it is relevant, and an even more minuscule proportion is valuable personally to me. So I have no reason to react. And then my inbox is filled with people. Oh, did you get a chance to look at it? What do you think? Well, I ignored you the first time for a good reason. And then if you bother me for a second and a third time, now you're really bothering me. So I'm probably going to disconnect. So what advice would you give to people who are trying to make their way through this very noisy competitive space? And where do they need to start?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that'll help the most is to speak to solution-aware prospects. So your message, you want to talk to those people that are ready to take some action now. So they've tried other things. They've tried, say you're an executive coach, you're a leadership coach, you're talking to executives who maybe they want to get to the C-suite. Say they're leaders, they want to get to the C-suite. So you want to say, hey, have you tried working on your executive presence, but you still can't command the room? Have you tried the DISC assessments and personality assessments, and your unique strengths and values, but still you don't feel like you're taking the right steps to, you're not making the right connections in your organization to playing the politics game the right way? Well, I've got something for you. So rather than saying, hey, do you want to work on your executive presence so that you're more powerful? Do you want to be a better communicator? Because when you say, like, do you want to be a better communicator, you're going to attract prospects that they're curious. They're like, yeah, that is something I want to do, but they're not necessarily ready to buy. So you're talking to tire kickers. But when you talk to those people that are like, yeah, they've tried this, and now you're saying, I've got something different and better. Now you're going to get someone on the phone who's like, hey, not one, like, you get me, and two, I'm trying to do something about this. So
Well, I think you've just created a distinction between interest and intent. How does one make sure that you're not listening with happy ears and focusing on the interest side of the equation, and you're actually identifying genuine intent and a willingness to take action?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also in talking to those solution-aware people, you can get more specific. You want to get specific on problems you're solving too. So I'm coming from a world of helping coaches and consultants and creating funnels. So I'm not necessarily working with big brands and big corporations that have tons of money for marketing. They can afford to put out kind of generic messaging, and they do billboards and ads that get creative awards and all that stuff that doesn't really drive sales, but it's just good for branding. So I'm talking from this perspective of, you want to create it. Like, the only way to move people online through social media is to be very specific on who you're talking to and have specific value with multiple touch points. So say you're a productivity coach, rather than saying, hey, here's my productivity calendar, here's a way you're going to be able to organize your life. Okay, that's going to get a lot of interest because everybody wants that. Everyone's interested in another productivity calendar, a new tool. But if you want to get somebody who's really like interested in taking action, you got to think, well, if I'm not just selling productivity, but I'm helping an executive to get his team to innovate twice as fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to offer my my innovators productivity schedule, or my specialized kind of framework for helping a team think up better ideas at a meeting. Like, we're getting to that level of specificity, because then you're really talking to someone who's trying to make something happen.
Okay, so this then speaks to another critical factor which most marketing and sales orgs that I'm familiar with are failing to take into account, which is the buyer's journey. Can we spend a couple of minutes talking about that, please?
I think a lot of marketing is disconnected. It's, you've got this ad, you've got this landing page, you've got content, and it's really just all saying the same thing. Like, you're talking about a problem, and you're talking about kind of broad, generic, surface level problems throughout, where you're not very unique, and you write ad copy, and it sounds completely different than your email. Like, the personality that's there isn't the same as the personality, the voice that is in your email and your content. And there's this disconnect that's not really moving people through this funnel. So the buyer's journey this is the way that I think about buyer's journey. So on the front end, say your content or your ads, you want to have buyer angles that do like what we talked about. You're talking to solution aware prospects. So that way you're getting the right people in the funnel that want to take action. And then from there, you want to describe the root cause of the problem that they're going through. So you're saying, hey, you're having these problems, but I'm going to tell you what the real reason is why you're having these problems. So for example, it's not just that you're a people pleaser, but the root cause of that has something to do with the mother-father wound, like the trauma you've experienced as a kid. But you're explaining the root cause they're going through in a way that most people don't, 90% of the market doesn't talk about. And you're saying that. So they're thinking like, oh, wow, this, Ryan, he really gets me. He really understands really what I'm going through in a way I haven't heard before. So then once you go there, then you can introduce your big idea, that signature program, or what is your 10x opportunity for them? Because since you described that root cause they're going through in a way that most people never have, now your big opportunity is going to be one of the only real few logical solutions that are going to make sense to solve that problem. So now you've pulled them into the next step. And then from there, it's, well, what really makes you a category one is your unique methodology. How are you better, faster, or easier than the competition? And when you describe that, that's what really makes you the category of one. That's your offer positioning. How are you positioned in the market, and compared to others, that's better, faster, or easier. So, and then from there, you have your content on the back end, your content pillars. How are you addressing these key things that your audience cares about and they talk about, so that you can continue to build the relationship on the back end with your emails and your content, because that's where 50% of the sales happen. So that's the kind of customer journey you need to be thinking about, bringing them from this problem awareness to root cause awareness to solution awareness to eventually when they buy from you.
So to bring that all together, our buyers, when they have a problem but don't really know what it is, are making space for it. But it's not top of mind, but it's niggling away, it's bothering them, it's an itch they can't quite scratch. So then they go looking to learn how to solve it. And this is the passive looking phase, where what we're looking for are people who are probably going to be downloading white papers, they'll be looking at videos, they'll be going on Instagram, and they'll be consuming content and speaking to their friends and their network, which we'll come back to in a minute. And then they move into active looking. Active looking is where they're exploring their options. So this is where they're trying to create a short list of 3 to 5 vendors that can provide what they want. Then when they're deciding, what they're doing is they're making trade-offs. They're saying, do we need 5 bedrooms or 4? Do we need a second bathroom? What are the shopping facilities like nearby? Can I walk, or do I need a car? All of that sort of stuff. Then first use. And this is where I think a lot of people get it terribly wrong, because first use is where buyer's remorse sets in big time. Because if their expectation, i.e., the promise that you made, how you positioned yourself, what they can expect to happen, is not met exactly, then their brain goes into a bit of a tailspin and starts catastrophizing and seeing how things will go wrong. So being able to map that journey beyond that into habit forming is all part of the same continuum, but it needs to be the work that you do up front. So that then brings me to the next question, which is, what do you do when you're working with your clients to help them think as their customer, not about them or what they can do or take from them?
This is the question of getting into the mind of your prospect. Really, because what happens with most of my clients, most everyone, is they fall into this expert language trap, where they're talking at this really high level of even saying things like executive presence, or communicating, or like communicating with eloquence and driving results and transforming, having transformational, innovational change. And it's like, it's this language that to you, it can make sense. You as the expert, you can know what that means, but really what somebody's thinking on the day-to-day, they're not thinking, how do I drive organizational change? They're thinking like, how do I get Sally to move her ass and work, like, work more every day when their whole project is depending on her and she's just not doing, like, she's not doing it. Like, how do I get my employees to work to hit their deadlines on time? How do I get my salespeople to sell twice as much as we are right now? How can I go from working 80 hours a week to working a normal 40 hours a week without sacrificing my shot at being a VP of this company? So you have to think, what are they literally saying in their mind as they're going in their day-to-day, those day-to-day problems. And this is why being niched is so important. This is why you really want to think about, and if you don't have to just talk to one person, you can have multiple pages, landing magnets, multiple personas. But if you're going to have a compelling message, you got to think, I'm talking to this executive of a startup. It's very different problems, a startup CEO, than a CEO that's working, making in a company making 100 million a year, So you got to think about that.
Absolutely. And this again speaks to something really critical, which is know your customer. And almost no one puts the time in to actually think as the customer, because they're so fixated on their quota. They're so fixated on the activity that they're not focused on the outcome. And I think one of my favorite models that I've been playing with over the years is looking at the inputs versus the outputs versus the outcomes. And if we look at how people are measured, they're typically focused on the activity, but they're paid, promoted, and fired on the outputs. But the thing that actually matters are the outcomes. And so there seems to be this corporate psychopathy where the board is fixated on one thing. So, for example, when someone's trying to develop their ICP, if you look at the way most people develop their ICP, they talk about the size, the scale, the number of heads, the sector, and all of that. But none of it has anything to do with the story that the customer is telling. And to build on Ryan's point, if you've watched Finding Nemo, there's that fantastic scene where they're swimming along and then they suddenly hit the Gulf Stream and whoosh, off they go. Well, that's what we're trying to do with our messaging and our marketing. So if you're advising a CMO or a chief revenue officer, what would you say to them to stop doing?
Comparing. Stop comparing yourself to everyone. I mean, it comes to the ChatGPT idea. It comes from it's this comparison trap kind of idea that we need to use. Like, this is what our competitors are saying. This is what the leaders of our industry are saying. So we need to say what they are saying, because then you don't have a Gulf Stream. You're just swimming. You're just swimming in the sea, but you've got to find your path. And the only way you can find your path is if you're connected to something, if you're connected to someone on a deep level. And really, you got to look internally. Like, what you should do is go survey your customers, go survey your list, and say, hey, like, I'm thinking about doing this thing. I'm thinking about doing this workshop. Here are a few ideas. Like, which one resonates with you the most? Because I guarantee you're going to be surprised by the results. And this is the first thing we do with clients before we, after we create their sales messaging, and before we do a campaign, we go survey their list, because you think you know what your people want, but you don't really know a lot of the time. So you got to ask. And everyone thinks that they know what the market really wants, but your list is different than everyone else's. So what I'd say, ignore the rest and really ask yourself and ask your people what they're looking for.
Well, I'll take it a bit further, which is go and speak to customers who fired you or who've left and gone with another solution, and also speak to the ones who are at risk. I was on a call yesterday with one of my former clients, and we run this thing called Sellers Anonymous. So basically, AA for recovering salespeople who are getting away from being transactional and selfish, and are focused on being genuinely customer-centric and demand-driven. And they have about a 1 in 4 win rate by going back to the people that they blew the call on and phoning up to apologize to start with, and then rekindling the conversation. Now, if you're struggling and you've got this volume play, chances are you've burnt through a whole heap of real prospects who, because of how you showed up and your failure to prepare, they kicked you into touch. So that's an easy, quick win, and it allows you to sell warm instead of cold, because they're already familiar with you and you're going in and being human and vulnerable. And I think that's part of the problem here, which is that most marketing is dull as dishwater. I mean, the IT space is full of some of the worst marketing I've ever seen in my life. And they talk about stuff that no one cares about. I mean, no one buys your product or service, they rent the outcome. And they talk carbungulators, defibrillators, and rippices. And the poor customer is just left there bewildered because it's just a wall of noise and it's deafening. So what are the questions that people should be asking themselves, but they're not, the frequently unasked questions?
Mm. Well, I loved what the one that situation you just described there is like, why didn't you buy? What, like, why not? So, we do that when we gauge interest for, say, a workshop. We get the people that did put in their info for more information, but they ended up not buying. We'll survey them and say, yeah, why didn't you buy? And we'll ask, what. So there's that, the why didn't you, and then there we can fill in the gaps. Maybe it just didn't have what they needed, not the right time, just whatever it is. It's good to get that feedback. And then we also ask, like, what would make this a 10 out of 10 for you? Or before they come on to a workshop, like what would need to happen on this for this experience for it to be a 10 out of 10? And that's just amazing feedback that we can get to not only like we do this before the workshop for people that have buyed, and we'll say like, well, how will this be amazing for you? Because then, in real time, when we're on that workshop, then we can deliver exactly what they said that they wanted, and that's gonna cause, create the upsell. And then we can do things like, testing, maybe if there's something that was missing. When we have order bumps and upsells that go along with the workshop, we can be testing different types of order bumps and upsells that gets more people, buying, having bigger order values.
So effectively, I've just heard you say, go looking for bad news and run to the sound of gunfire, and your customers are your best teachers. Would that be a fair summary?
That's fair, Marcus. I like it.
Okay. So then let's look at the practicalities of it. I think many people are trying to focus on efficiency before they focus on effectiveness. And if you scale what's ineffective efficiently, you end up with a very fat, constipated middle of the funnel. So, how do you get past the attachment people have to doing things the way they've always done, especially when the context has changed, as it clearly has? The last year, I'm seeing sales teams, as a matter of routine, averaging around 30% of quota for where they should be in the year. And they've got 6 months left to make up the 70% they were behind and fill their pipeline up, which is nigh on empty. So what advice would you give to people to focus on the right end of the problem?
Mm-hmm. Man, well, we're getting real deep into just like human nature here because we always want to go back to what's comfortable and what we're used to, even if it doesn't work that well. It's a lot easier. We're avoiding a lot of pain because at least when we're doing something bad, but we know it works, at least we know that when we put something in, we're going to get it out, even if it's not the result we really want. So yeah, how can we do something that's different, maybe a bit difficult, but ultimately is going to work better, especially when it comes to sales? Well, I mean, AI comes to be one of maybe the best ones, the easiest thing we can do that's going to help a lot because the way I've been doing things lately, it's not that I'm using AI to send out more outreaches and I'm spending less time. I'm spending the same amount of time, but I'm getting 3-4 times the amount of personalized data for outreach. That's just that's allowing me to have a better connection with a prospect and get onto a call with more people. I mean, it's really incredible. Like really what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of sales page critiques. So I will go to a sales page and I'm talking to people that are spending money on ads. So I know that they're actively trying to make this thing work. I look at their page, I tell them all these reasons why it's not working and what they should do. And then I do that in a Loom video, and then I take the transcript of that, feed it into Claude. Claude has my voice, has my I call it my messaging Bible, which has all my agency's personal messaging in it. And then Claude spits out basically a summary of what I said in my voice that doesn't sound like AI sounds like, and even if it does sound some AI, that's fine. I'm not trying to hide that fact either. But now I have this beautiful summary of their page that they can open their email and they can look at this and they can read it. And they're like, wow, this is completely about my page, it's personalized. And then they watch that Loom video and they see me speaking it and going into even more detail. And, for about every 15 of these outreaches, it might take me 15 minutes total to send out, I'm making a sale. And, that's around $1,000. So I'm like, these outreaches are personalized, they take work, but they work really well. And I'm in a niche here for who I'm talking to, but if you're someone who's trying to cut the noise, like reach these hard to reach people, emails don't just an email in the inbox doesn't work anymore. DMs don't work. Doesn't matter how many you send. Like you got to really right there capture their attention and be personalized. And I guess that's the best way I can put it. There's no easy way. Lead generation is not easy, no matter what you do. But
Well, again, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is generally quite simple. First of all, stop doing the things that don't work. That will save you a fortune. If I go into an organization, a sales organization that has a top of the funnel activity, the first thing I'm going to look at is, well, what isn't working? The average SDR has somewhere between 10 and 25 grand's worth of data and technology in order to support each individual. And you're talking about 40 to 90 grand in salaries, which is just outrageous. And then you have to manage them. You have to have security. You have to have HR, payroll, and all of those other things. Those resources can be much better redeployed on developing a warm and hot market by personalizing and creating relationships with people and segmenting their lists into people who are ready to buy now, so they're at deciding or late active looking stage, and those who will buy if you're not so impatient and you don't try and sell to them when having a sales conversation is likely to be rebutted and see you as a threat. So if I'm passively looking and you're trying to dip your hand in my pocket to take my credit card out, I'm going to see you as an obstacle to my success. You're not going to be my ally. You're going to be at best my accomplice and probably my adversary. And I think what you've touched on here is the real importance of using AI as a thought partner. So let's dig into that a little bit as well. You said that you're learning a huge amount. I'm really curious about what you have learned by using AI in the way you are, about your customer, your market, your competition, and what works and what doesn't work, and doing it at speed.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, ideation is the biggest thing. It's like even I was thinking about, how can I best explain how, oh, so maybe a good example is now in doing outreaches. So I've got my messaging, my personal messaging, kind of this narrative I've told you about here, this customer journey, hitting the right types of people, building the relationship. And when I do an outreach, what I'll do is I'll say, here's a prospect I want to talk to. Here is their landing page copy. Here's their website. Here's their LinkedIn profile bio. Match my messaging and to what they're saying, and give me talking points for how I can say that, how I can help them, basically. Based on my sales argument, take their specific information from their pages and give me ideas for ways I can match it up. So how my outreaches in the past were just, hey, here's your page. This can be better. This can be better. This can be better. Here's a generic idea. Now I've got Claude giving me specific language that they use. And like now, instead of having to dig into doing research and say, oh, they have these cool credentials, they worked with these companies, their story was about this, Claude's just giving it to me right there. So without even looking at their page, I can say, hey, you have a huge opportunity here because, to be frank, your language sounds like all the other executive leadership coaches that are out there, but you've worked with with Pfizer and Unilever, and you've run huge teams. Like you have way more experience than most of these people, and I'm sure you have all like great methodologies and frameworks and ideas. If you brought these to the table, you would blow the competition out of the water, and you'd get 2-3 times the conversions on this page that you are. So that's really sped up the research process for me. But I'll tell you what, like just by asking questions, sometimes I make my best insights come when I make mistakes. Like when I say, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to type that in," and then Claude will give me something like, "Huh, yeah, no, I can totally use this application here, and I didn't think about that before." And so it's just it's a partner. Yeah, yeah.
I agree. The number of happy accidents I've had along the way that have created openings, and it's introduced me to other ideas, other ways of looking at the world, new versions of psychological models, and so on. It's been incredibly powerful. And one of the things that I have noticed on so many websites, because I do something like that with my drift report, and I look at how the job to be done of each page, what's intended and what the actual job is. And one of the things that I see over and over again is people clogging up their pipeline with calls to action like book a meeting or book a demo for people who are just interested. And the net result of that is salespeople spend an inordinate amount of time, north of 50% of their customer face time, speaking to people who cannot buy, will not buy, or you should not sell to. So that's a really simple fix. I was talking about the amount of money and tech that's involved with all those SDRs. Well, those SDRs have pitiful conversion rates, and it's a soul destroying job. I was coaching someone yesterday, and he's on his own. He's in a territory where there is no one else, and the only time his manager speaks to him is to beat him up about his pipeline. Now, if you're going to spend money on people, stop wasting it on stuff that clearly doesn't work and simply creates noise, and spend it on things that and redivert that money to useful things like educating your own workforce on understanding your customer, your market, your competition. So in terms of how you've gone about doing that, you obviously work in a micro business, so you don't have a lot of resources, but now you've got this incredible capability because you're asking Claude the right kind of questions, and it's got pretty much anyone throughout history at your fingertips. Are you using it in order to help you to write copy in a particular style, or are you trying to use it to emulate your customer's voice or give them a voice that they didn't really know they had?
Hmm. Yeah, I think more the latter. Using Claude to give our clients a voice that's their voice, and also a voice that they never thought that they had. So the thing about Claude and writing copy is if you just ask Claude to write you copy, it's going to give you generic crap. It's going to sound bad. You know it, I know it, but for some reason people post this stuff everywhere, especially over LinkedIn. I hate it. But it's not their fault. I mean, it is their fault, but really, and it goes back to the whole premise of my work. It's that you need to have unique and compelling sales messaging architecture. You need to know what is your root cause, what is your big idea, what's your unique mechanism, what are your buyer angles, what are they thinking? When you have all that stuff down and then you create copy, then all of a sudden Claude can create stuff that actually can follow a customer journey, that can actually sound differentiated. And especially when, say, you take 10, 15 of your last videos or the posts that you've written on your own and you combine that with Claude. So you create a project, and in that project you have project knowledge. So in that project knowledge you have 10 to 15 transcripts of your latest videos or just of your latest posts, because that's your voice, that's you writing, you speaking. And then you have your sales messaging document. And then when you create stuff, now it sounds like you because you have your examples, and it's unique and compelling because it's based on core sales messaging. So this is what we do with all of our clients. We start with the messaging, and then once we do like a lunch for a workshop or a product or something like that, now we've got all of these sales driven types of pieces of content in their voice, and we create them a GPT. We'd be like a Marcus GPT. Well, now you have this Claude to brainstorm ideas with, hooks with, create copy for you, and it can do a pretty damn good job. It's basically at the level of at the level of a moderate copywriter. Then once we get, say, a few more workshops and do like a big launch under its belt, and we've created a bunch of ads, and that's, then we can get it up to a level, so we throw in some sales pages that we've written, then eventually we can get up to a level of like a CMO copywriter, kind of like what we have. But, it just takes context is really the thing. And then you can create good stuff. But if you don't have that context.
Well, the context is so critical. And again, this is where I think a lot of people are coming unstuck. I've lived through 7 recessions so far. This is going to be my 8th. But I've been in the workforce for 4. Now, since in 1990, 2001, 2008, and 2019, exactly the same pattern has occurred. There's a panic from the top, and they scream, "We need more leads." So they throw out more activity, and then they fill the funnel up with mostly rubbish. People with interest but not intent, and people who are willing but not able. And so you get a lot of serial seminar goers, tire kickers, and it's very hard to break that pattern. But you also touched on something earlier on, which my pal Kyle Gray talks about as the curse of the expert. And this is where we have a tendency, if we know a lot, to believe that other people need to be fed from a fire hose, guilty as charged. And we're not very good at telling story. So let's finish off by really focusing around story. How does one create amazing, compelling, impossible to ignore stories?
I mean, yeah, there's so much. There's a lot. Story to me. Story means a lot of different things. Like, I mean, the best story is your story, your personal story. Lots of people think that their story isn't compelling or unique or boring. That's definitely not true. There's definitely, I mean, it's the only way to stand out. The only way to truly stand out is to tell your story. Now, your story isn't always, hey, in the third grade I did this, in sixth grade I did this, and now, whatever. That's one way of your story. I could say that's your hero story, is how you've come to be where you are now and your previous experience in that. But the best way to tell story, my favorite way to have your narrative out there, is to give your opinions, your thoughts and opinions on things, and really talk about and create your, what's your to be polarizing. That's how you be polarizing. Is if you say, hey, I don't like AI. Hey, I hate, or I'm just so annoyed with all of these like Facebook marketers that I've talked to all these clients. They're wasting tens of thousands of dollars on marketing that doesn't do anything because they're just using copy paste ChatGPT content. Like, that's a narrative. That's a story. That's an opinion. The reason why no one cuts through the noise is because they don't talk about what they think or what they feel. Because we've been taught about marketing and sales really to always focus on the other, and you say you, and you focus on them, but they miss the point. Because if you want to really focusing on others, it's not just using you language. Like, if you want to serve people, you need to help them understand you, because it's a relationship. It's a two-way relationship. So I think too many are only thinking about talking about others, but they're not talking about how they think and they feel. That's what really creates connection. We're missing the two-way street here.
Simon Bowen talks about the four levels of seller. So you have the pill pusher, who's basically a feature monkey who races to the bottom to discount. Then you have the subject matter expert, and there are a lot of them, and they all largely sound the same. So you eventually become a pill pusher. And then you have the hero seller, and the hero seller is against something, and they attract people because they're feeling that thing that they're against. But the problem with that is that it creates a codependency. And then there's a massive gap between the hero seller and the sage seller. And the sage seller is someone to whom people come to because of their wisdom. They're hoping some of their smarts will rub off on them. Now, I think telling that story is really key, and your own personal story. But I think one of the other things that is so badly handled on social media, and particularly on LinkedIn, is really engaging thoughtfully with other people's content, because it's a ready-made marketplace, and it's a gift that's free or nearly free, depending on your subscription level, where you can tap into a large referral base. And so using story, using engaging ways of responding to other people's content. And you don't have to agree with them. You can be respectful, but disagree. And that then draws the marginal prospects from that network into yours for you to then build a relationship with. So I'm curious if that's something that you advocate.
Mm-hmm. I do advocate it, and I've done that a lot. I'll say something about that, and but my favorite way to connect with others and cross-pollinate, say, is what we're doing here, is being on podcasts, like the ability to go in depth and have a conversation like this, where your people are going to see me talk, my people are going to see you talk, and we have that cross. On LinkedIn, if you don't engage and comment, you're not going to get anything. You will not get exposure on your content. Sure, you can go viral once in a while. And I have a client. He's a great storyteller. He's had a few posts now that have gotten millions of impressions. And what were those posts? One was him telling the story about him adopting his daughter. It was like a shortish post this long, but he has a base. He's had a base where he's been on LinkedIn for 10 years, and he's commented, but he doesn't go anything extreme, but he's commented, he's posted a lot. He's been in health tech sales for like 35 years, and people know him and respect him, and he's done a good job there. Now, if you're someone that doesn't have, say, that experience, if you haven't built that community on LinkedIn, if you don't comment, it's not even that other people aren't going to see your stuff and get exposure, but LinkedIn just will not push your stuff at all. And I'll tell you what, these big influencers, these people that, the Jasmine Alex and the Justin Welches, and these like big LinkedIn influencers, what they did is they spent all damn day commenting, hundreds. There's that guy Jasmine. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but one of his posts, he just said it, he would spend at least 5 hours a day commenting on other people's posts, and he hired 2 other assistants to also comment on his behalf. That's how these people build these organic followings like this. It's not just because they have great content. And I know. Their content is usually just generic, still not that great. I mean, it's better than most, but it's not that much better than anyone else's content. So this is what I really dislike about LinkedIn, the LinkedIn game, the marketers that are just selling that, hey, you just create great content. I could tell you some more stuff too. I'll say, but it's great to engage, and that's how you can do it. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and I've had success and I do it, but 90% of my business comes from my direct outreaches for a reason, because I control exactly what I talk to. I know that I'll make sales, and I do love to comment, but I'm honestly just looking for other avenues as far as growth organically, like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, making shorts, making videos that people actually want to see. And I'll just finish one last thing on this LinkedIn growth is, pay attention when you see people that have 20, 30, 100,000 followers, and they've got like 100 likes and 60 comments on a post. The next post, they've got 100 likes and they've got 50 comments. The next one, they've got 150 likes and 100 comments. Look at those comments. It's all AI. You go to, and you look, you go to the next profile of someone who commented, the same group. They're people in pods. They're paying each other to comment on each other's posts, and it's all fake. Large majority of these people that have that engagement, it's not real, and they're being dubbed as experts, which I don't like and think is even dangerous, and a reason why people waste so much money.
Well, especially in this economy, we're going into a really tough period, and it's going to be a prolonged tough period because the world order is changing. And when that kind of disruption happens, it creates massive uncertainty and volatility, and it generally doesn't end well. So we're going to have to learn how to trade in an environment that is changing fast against our will. It's forced, unwanted change. And unless you are able to adapt and innovate in a context like that, you're going to effectively sign your own death warrant if you're working on the basis of we'll wait and see. Now is not the time to wait and see. Now is the time to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty by testing stuff and trying different things. I was speaking to a pal of mine, and his partner works at one of the big consulting firms as head of risk, and she spends about half an hour a day on Instagram learning stuff. Now, I'd never have thought that of someone in her early 40s who is clearly incredibly bright and a high performing professional. That wouldn't have been a platform that I would have thought she would be on. But actually, she's there almost every day because there are shorts on there and she can consume insights very quickly. So look more broadly than LinkedIn. Look at YouTube, Twitter, well, X. It's good for some people. I've got another client of mine who probably generates about 60 inbounds a month of high quality leads on X by talking about stuff that's slightly outside of his normal domain. And that's the other thing. Don't necessarily stick to your onions. Look at adjacent markets. Look at other stuff. In support of what you said about your client, I remember when my father died, I had something like 13,000 hits on the post, and I had hundreds of comments. My wife had the same experience when her father died, and those human interest stories actually draw people in. So don't necessarily stick to being professional and boring. Go out there and expose your vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And it's great to combine these things too. So a style of post that I have, it's called a story seller post. And it's basically using a story anecdote from your life or from a book or from a movie or from a current event, and then tying that into your business. So it's basically like you always want to start with a story because that's what hooks people in the most. You have a good hook line, something curiosity driven. The best hooks are always based in curiosity. There's this guy, his name's Gary Halbert. He's known as the greatest copywriter that has ever lived. And he's on a boat with this guy, John Carlton, another great copywriter. And Gary asked John, he's like, John, why do you, what do you think's the biggest, I don't know, I already gave away the ending, but what's like the biggest driver for getting someone to take action, like in a sales? What's best for a hook? And someone said, I think he responded, well, is it story or maybe it's social proof? And he said, no, it's curiosity. And I see it and I agree. If we're curious people, curious beings. And all we got to do, the headline doesn't have to do with your post. Now you don't want to do things like just say sex and then you get someone, sure, you get them to click, but then you lose trust with the reader. So you want to connect that headline, the hook to the post. But anyway, curiosity, and then go into your story. And then that's the personal part. I saw this girl walking up the stairs in the rain yesterday, and she's holding 2 grocery bags, and she's just walking calmly. Everyone else around her sprinting up the stairs, covering themselves. But I thought, man, this girl's a badass. She's just walking up in the rain, doesn't care. And you know what? That's kind of how leadership is. A good leader can be, even when it's raining, we got heavy burdens on our shoulders. Maybe, so you see a lot of these posts, that's a generic one, but that's a great thing to do. Take things from your life, and how can you connect it to how you help your clients, to a result you've gotten. I think the best kind of way you can have the best of both worlds.
Excellent. Well, we're coming to the end. So I'd like to ask you about who you've been influenced by and what you would recommend people read, watch, or listen to.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the marketing side, I've definitely been heavily influenced by direct response copywriters and copywriting. Guys like Dan Kennedy and Gary Halbert and John Carlton and Gene Schwartz, Robert Collier. These are like the classics of direct response copywriting. And that's really when the first time I thought about marketing and just thought about the idea of action and human psychology and persuasion and influence. Those are things that I'm most interested in and that persuade my work. How do I get people to take action? But also the other half of what I do and teach. So my kind of method, it's called the Market Messiah method. It's the idea of combining your message, your unique message, and spreading ideas on the personal side and the business side. So for me, all my success in my life has come from my belief system, my spiritual belief system. So I kind of grew up and do a lot of study in this idea of new thought, the idea that your thinking is what creates your reality. More popularly today, like the ideas of The Secret, say, is how it's been really popularized. But these top 3 books that I have here, this book, Course in Miracles, The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, and this book, Osho. He's this another kind of spiritual, I don't know, kind of Indian guy. So anyway, I really think that if people thought more too about their belief system, thought more about how they see the world, and just realized how much their thought affects everything about their life, and that they can believe and know that God, the universe, has their back when they believe that, and when they look for the good, they will get the good. There's a lot of shit that happens in the world, but we have a choice in how to think. And I think the more that you choose something that's going to serve you and serve others, you will get that as long as you believe it.
You've got a golden ticket, and you can go back and whisper in the ear of the idiot Ryan, age 23, who thought he was invincible, immortal, and was always right. What one bit of advice would you give him that would have saved him a lot of angst?
Yeah. I had an answer prepared for this, and then I kind of just thought of something maybe different I should think, but because my initial answer, and a good answer, I think, is to move faster. Stop being so worried about failing and just act more, do more. Like I used to spend an hour before I would do at being 23, I had a video production company and I'm doing sales, trying to get leads. We failed because we didn't make enough money. But I'd spend like an hour thinking about my pitch and what I would say if they said this, and thinking about, okay, they think about this, so I should think about saying this. And I would just go forever in my mind, making loops about this conversation. And then a lot of times I'd call and they wouldn't even answer, or they'd never call back. So it was just a wasted kind of effort. And there's a lot of things in my life that I'm sure, I know have been the same, that I just, instead of just doing something, I would think about all the possible outcomes and be worried about it, when really I should have just trusted myself and took some more action. So that's one thing. The other thing was probably more just like go drink less alcohol and worry less about women, and just like focus, find some nice girl and settle down early, and just, focus on work. Because right now I'm really at this, I'm trying to attract a partner for myself, a real nice woman that can help make me better. And I used to think that would be a burden to work, but I'm starting to realize now that my community and friends and someone who could be a partner for me would actually make things better and lift me up, and that I need help. Maybe that's the lesson. Like, Ryan, it's okay. You need help here. So it's okay to get help. Yeah.
Excellent. How can people get hold of you?
LinkedIn be the best way. That's my pride and joy. All my content is there. And yeah, please share that. Reach out to me in a DM on LinkedIn. That's going to be the way.
Excellent. Ryan Clark, thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Pleasure.
This has been Marcus Kauke signing off from the Inquisitor podcast. If you found this useful and insightful, then please get in touch. If you're looking for a spouse, then drop Ryan a line. And so if you're looking for a way to cut through the noise and to thrive through the impending chaos without having your soul burnt out and without having to sell out, then get in touch, because we've created an approach called Most Trusted. And the whole idea is that you become the most trusted person that people that you know, and they refer you, so that you never have to sell cold. You only ever sell hot, and you sell to people who you can actually help, because selling is a service. And we only have one function in sales, which is to empower other people to make the right decision. So if that resonates with you, then get in touch with me, either via LinkedIn or whatever the other channels are that you know me on. In the meantime, stay safe and happy selling.